There are some crazy names at the quarterback position in the 2025 transfer portal, and a couple of those guys include Luke Kromenhoek, Carson Beck, and John Mateer. Those are the three guys that most people are talking about, but in my opinion, there is a unicorn who's the fourth best transfer, and his name is Fernando Mendoza. Not only does he have NFL size already, but he can both use his legs, has an incredible arm, and also has an incredible story. He's a guy that Ivy League schools and some of the smartest programs in the country wanted, so not only does he have the physical tools, but he has the stats and he has the mind to be one of the best quarterbacks in college football. I think he's going to have a huge 2025 season and then go off to the 2026 NFL draft, where I think he could be a first-round pick. A lot of this is a little bit far-fetched, but let's talk about the rise of Fernando Mendoza. How did Fernando Mendoza go from a guy who was a two-star recruit who had no offers until nearly signing day to now being a guy who's worth probably over $1 million in the portal and could be a first-round pick? But before we get started, if you're a big fan of college football, be sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like if you support today's video, and let me know what player, team, topic, or situation I can cover next. Now let's get started and talk about the insane rise of Fernando Mendoza. Okay, so before we get started, go down to the comment section below and give me your favorite transfer who you think deserves a full-length feature on. Also be sure to check out the playlist as it'll be updated throughout the next couple of months, and my video on John Mateer is also pretty cool, so go ahead and check that one out. So in order to understand how Fernando Mendoza got to this point, we first need to go back in time. Fernando's journey actually started in Boston, but when he was young, he moved to South Miami, where his parents put him in sports early on. His parents were former athletes, as his mom played tennis at Cornell, and his dad rode crew at Brown. His love of football started in elementary school, when he eventually joined the little team known as the South Miami Gray Ghosts. Fernando initially did not like the idea of being a quarterback, but his mom preferred him to play that position due to the lower likelihood of collisions and injuries and concussions and such. However, there was one professional athlete who changed his opinion and perception on the quarterback position. He said, quote, "After watching Tom Brady in the 2011 Super Bowl and saw the amount of influence he had on the team, he was essentially the game manager. He was very intelligent out there, and he knew what he was doing and how he commanded the team. I was naturally attracted to the game of football already, and I was like, I want to be the quarterback." Okay, so he eventually got to Columbus High School, which is a pretty prestigious school, and he joined quarterback alum, including Brian Griese, Mike Shula, and Chris Mason. They were the only D1 quarterbacks to ever come out of Columbus, but Fernando would eventually also join that list, and his little brother Alberto Mendoza would also join that list after he was originally committed to James Madison, but followed Curt Cignetti to Indiana in the class of 2024. So before his sophomore year, Fernando knew he wasn't going to play, but he would have the opportunity to start 5 games due to injuries on the team. Mendoza wanted to play for the Miami Hurricanes growing up, as he literally grew up 5 miles from the University of Miami, and Mendoza's dad was actually friends with Mario Cristobal while they were in high school. When he first started to get into the football recruiting world, he went to a Miami Hurricanes football camp his senior year. When he asked if Miami had any interest in him, the message was, quote, "We might take you as a walk-on." Mendoza said it lit a fire under him. "I was sad, and when I came to the realization I'm not going to be a Miami football player, it was God's path for me." Mendoza was not a highly rated recruit at all, as despite leading Columbus to a Tri-County title during 2020 and a Class 8A state semifinal appearance in 2020 as a senior, he was not a big recruit. He completed 63% of his passes, threw for just under 1,200 yards and 11 touchdowns, and those aren't exactly the biggest numbers in the world. But at nearly 6'6", he had the size. So what happened recruiting-wise for him? Well, he said, quote, "From the start, I started getting some interest from schools such as Georgia Tech, Louisville, Maryland, and others. However, as the recruiting process went on with the shortened junior season, it was mostly offers from FCS schools such as the Ivy League, and Yale was one of them where I ended up committing. This led him to a bit of a whirlwind recruitment, as he had chosen the Bulldogs over FIU, Bryant, Lehigh, and Penn. Then things would eventually shift. He was rated as a 2-star recruit at the time, and he felt the prolonged recruiting dead periods limited his exposure and ability to get more offers. But the Cal Golden Bears coaching staff eventually did take notice and went all in on the quarterback over the last month of that 2022 cycle. Late in the recruiting process, Cal's offensive coordinator Musgrave and the staff decided with his film he could help the program. From there, everything came together very quickly. He was in talks with Alabama to be a preferred walk-on, but Cal popped up late, and they decided to offer him, which he would happily take. He had actually already signed to be with Yale, but because they don't play for scholarships there, he was able to get out of that pretty easily. Why Cal? He said it was, quote, "the most like-minded with his offensive philosophy that he liked, and he'd done a ton of research on the program and school in general. So when it came to things besides football, also the elephant in the room is that this was the only Power 4 offer he had, so of course, no matter what, he's going to want to go there and make up whatever reason possible." I'm sure he did love Cal, though. Many were hoping he would have an impact for the Golden Bears, but nationally, nobody knew about him. He did go 15-4 as a starter his last 2 seasons, but according to 24/7 Sports, he was a 2-star recruit, the number 140 quarterback, and the 2,149th best player in the class of 2022. Pretty crazy, huh? Yeah. So how did he end up doing in Berkeley? Well, let's go ahead and take a look. Personally, Mendoza is one of my favorite quarterbacks in college football, and I actually first heard about him when I did a feature on Cal's quarterback room back in 2023. But in 2022, I guess Cal fans knew about this guy, as apparently he was starting to impress in practice. He was a surprise through the first week of training camp, and while there was no threat of him taking over Jack Plummer or Kai Milner at the top of the depth chart, he was making the most of his opportunities and showing he at least did belong at the Power 5 level. Yeah, so Mendoza ended up not playing at all in 2022, but 2023, he would get an opportunity. With both Milner and Plummer transferring away, the main starter was supposed to be Sam Jackson. Jackson ended up having a decent start, but he got hurt. By the end of the season, Mendoza was then thrown in with the Wolves and told to figure it out. He'd play heavy duty in their last 7 games, throwing for 207 yards and 2 touchdowns in his first career big-time game against number 15 Oregon State. Then he'd followed it up with 2 more scores against both Utah and USC. Unfortunately, the first 4 games that he played in all resulted in losses, but he showed a lot of potential. He had 2 touchdowns on the ground and 6 through the air. Pretty dang good for a redshirt freshman. Mendoza would end up on a high note, as he'd end up beating Washington State 42-39 with 2 touchdowns without a pick. Then he'd have 3 scores in a win on the road against Stanford and 2 scores in a win over UCLA. Mendoza had gone 3-4 as a starter, and then he'd get an opportunity to start in their game against Texas Tech. Unfortunately, the Independence Bowl did not go according to plan, as they got blown out 34-14, and Mendoza threw 3 interceptions. But he did have 261 yards. In total, Mendoza threw for 1,700 yards, with 14 touchdowns and 10 picks, and 2 more scores on the ground. He was named one of the Pac-12 Freshmen of the Year, and obviously had plenty of potential going into 2024, but he would have competition. Chandler Rogers had played plenty of college football, and he had transferred in from North Texas, and he was hoping to win the starting job. But after just a couple of games, it was obvious that not only was Fernando the future of the program, but could be a bright star in college football. In their first game against UC Davis, he'd end up throwing for 158 yards and a touchdown. But his real magic came in week 2. Against Auburn on the road, an SEC school, Mendoza would go into Jordan-Hare, throw for 233 yards with 2 touchdowns, and didn't have a single interception. He helped beat the Tigers 21-14, and their plan of playing both him and Rogers had now evaporated. He completely pulled away and was now the guy. He actually completed 17 of his first 18 passes in that game, and he was only sidelined due to a small injury. But a couple weeks later, he'd have one of the biggest games of his life, as after losing to Florida State, he'd now play at home against number 8 Miami, and College Game Day was here. Remember, this was the team that did not offer him that he wanted to be a part of. He said he had no bad blood though, and would refuse to do the upside down U or anything like that. He respected Miami, and unfortunately I guess some could say it came back to bite him, as pretty much nothing went his way. There were a couple late, weird, controversial calls, and after Cal got off to a hot start, they'd end up losing 39-38. Mendoza only completed 11 passes in that game, which was the lowest of the season. From there, Cal started to lose more football games, as they then lost to number 22 Pitt, and by 1 to NC State, but luckily, he would finish the season on a tear. Against Oregon State, he threw for 364 yards and 2 touchdowns. Against Wake Forest, he threw for 385 yards and 3 touchdowns. And then finally against Stanford, he threw for 299 yards and 3 touchdowns. Sandwiched between those games was also a loss to Syracuse, and after being sidelined for the remainder of the season due to an injury, Mendoza in total finished with 3,000 yards, 16 touchdowns and 6 picks, and once again 2 rushing scores. Mendoza ended up having a really good season, and also this came in light of a terrible offensive line, a pretty inept offensive system, and not many good weapons. Mendoza put up crazy numbers despite not having much help, and his potential was pretty much endless. While at first some thought he could end up going to Miami or Georgia, or somewhere really big like that, I personally knew it was going to be Indiana all along because of a hidden secret I knew. Okay, newsflash, it really wasn't much of a secret, but his little brother Alberto Mendoza was a 2-star recruit who flipped from James Madison to Indiana when Cignetti ended up going there. After Alberto never entered the portal, to me it made logical sense that Fernando would consider Indiana. His brother was there, Curt Cignetti was fresh off of the best season in school history, and Cignetti turned Curtis Rourke from a guy who no one talked about to all of a sudden probably a day 3 draft pick, and the most efficient quarterback in college football. To me it made a lot of sense, and with him being gone, Mendoza would step in and be the starter, and that's pretty much exactly how the script went. Mendoza committed to Indiana, making this a huge get for the Hoosiers, and also I think this is a pretty good career move for Fernando. In his 2 seasons at Cal, he threw for 4,700 yards with 30 touchdowns and also ran for 4 more. He was considered one of the top overall players in the 2025 transfer portal and the number 4 overall quarterback. This came after he finished 2nd in the ACC in completion percentage, 3rd in passing yards per game, 6th in yards total, and 8th in touchdown passes. As I said, Mendoza will likely replace Curtis Rourke, as his backup Taven Jackson ended up transferring to UCF, and I doubt Alberto or Tyler Cherry, or the guy they brought in from Old Dominion, will really challenge it. That is Fernando's job to lose, and he's in charge of getting Indiana back to a good season, and hopefully back to the college football playoff, which is Curt Cignetti's goal. Cignetti is super excited to get Fernando to Bloomington and get him going, as he believes he'll be a threat both through the air and on the ground. Curt said, quote, "He's got a lot of talent. He was under duress, quite frankly, a lot last year at Cal, and we're excited about him. We'll fit him into the system, tweak our system according to the quarterback, and also see what we have offensively." Okay, so in coaching words, Curt Cignetti is confident in Fernando Mendoza, and I guess the jury will still be out. Not many people really know about Fernando nationally, and scouts really aren't talking about him all that much. But when you take a look at his body of work, to me he seems like a quarterback that could come out of nowhere in 2025, put up big numbers, be efficient, and also with his physical tools, become one of those big names in the 2026 draft. That's just my personal take, but if it doesn't work out next year, he also has 2026 to play in. But for now, let's have to wait and see. I hope you guys enjoyed this full-length feature on Fernando Mendoza, his story, and how this all happened. Let me know your thoughts though. If you're a Cal or an Indiana fan, what do you think of Fernando Mendoza? Casual fans, do you think he's a big-time 2026 NFL draft prospect? And what other transfer should I cover next? Be sure to let me know down below, leave a like if you want to support today's video, subscribe if you're new, and check out all my other videos on the end screen. Hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.